cowboy hat to the ground, and he looked just like a scarecrow come riding into town. Yeah, he was king of the old Cracker Cowboy, riding forever across the old scrub trails. Sing us a song and a story to tell about the legend of Bone Mizell.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dwayne Littlejohn, and I'm here in Arcadia, Florida, to interview a cattle baron by the name of Ziba King. Ziba King was the employer of a famous Cracker Cowboy, that's what they called him down here, a Cracker Cowboy, by the name of Bone Mizell. Ziba, tell us something about Bone and what made him so famous, and tell us some stories about what he did.
Them boys are out in the woods, and they found this old cow that was just a mean cuss. And ain't nobody could mess with that cow. So my son, I told him that anybody that could catch that cow could have it. The only person, or the only cowboy that decided that he was going to try to take this cow down and put his mark on it was Bone Mizell. So he gets his knife out and he gets his rope out and he throws the rope around the cow's horns and starts dragging him out of the woods, but that old cow was a whole lot stronger than Bone was. And next thing you know, he's pulling Bone into the woods. And before you know it, Bone dropped his knife on the ground, which is what he was going to use to clip them ears, you know, put his mark on that cow. So they got into the woods and fur started flying and leaves started and dirt flying all over the place, screaming and yelling and hollering, and old Bone come out of there all by himself, and his shirt was all ripped up and he was all scratched up from the palmettos, and all the boys looked at him and they said, "Well, Bone, I guess that cow got you, didn't he? Because you didn't get him." And he said, "Oh, yes, I did." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You dropped your knife on the ground. I saw that. Ain't no way you can mark that cow." He said, "Oh, yes, I could." And he said, "Well, how'd you do it?" He said, "I used my teeth." He says, "I marked that cow's ears with my teeth. I cut it right in there." They said, "There ain't no way you could do that." He said, "Well, you go in there and take a look." So the boys went in the woods, and sure enough, they found that cow with Bone's mark on it, you know, and it was his cow, and he earned it, and he was happy to do it. It wasn't a problem for him, okay? So that was the story there that I thought would be interesting.
That's really entertaining.
Yeah.
He must have been quite a man, this Bone Mizell.
Oh, he was.
Tell me more. Any other stories that you have about him?
Sure. He never was a church-going man. Couldn't read, couldn't write. But he had some folks that were friends of his that belonged to the church. And one Sunday, he was looking to borrow some money. So he goes to the church and he climbs up the stairs to the choir loft, which is where his friends were singing. And unfortunately, he had started drinking already and he was a little bit under the weather. So he was able to make contact with his friends and accomplish his mission. And he started down the stairs, and of course he wasn't really too accurate. He was a little tipsy. And he tripped and fell. And he started rolling down the steps head over heels. And he got to the bottom and actually landed on his feet. He stood up and people looked at him and they said, "Are you okay? Did you get hurt? Are you all right?" And he looked at him and he said, "Ain't no problem." He said, "I always come down the stairs that way." People kind of thought quite a sense of humor, okay? He used to like to gamble.
Oh, really? I suppose.
Yeah. And one time he was with some boys. They were playing poker, and they were playing chips, you know, poker chips, and they were just having a good time. And somebody told the sheriff about the game, and that was in DeSoto County, okay, which is not far from Arcadia, and it was in a private residence. So the sheriff come and walked in and said, "Boys, we're gonna have to pull this game." He said, "You're all going to jail, and tomorrow you're going to meet the judge and pay the fine. because you can't be gambling. And Bone says to the sheriff, well, wait a minute. He said, we ain't gambling. He said, well, I saw you playing cards. He said, I know we're playing cards, Sheriff. He said, but we're playing for chips. We ain't playing for money. The sheriff says, hold on there, Bone Mizell. Who you think you're talking to? He said, chips is the same as money. Come on, don't give me that kind of stuff. So they took them all off to jail. The next morning, they all started into the judge's quarters. And everybody paid their fine. It was $85 a piece, which is a pretty good bit of money.
I guess so, yeah.
Sure. Bone Mizell walked up and he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a whole bunch of chips and laid them on the judge's desk. And the judge says, well, what's this? He said, well, that's how I'm paying my fine. And the judge said, what do you mean paying your fine? He said, this ain't money, this is chips. He said, now wait a minute. Yesterday the sheriff told me that chips was the same as money, so there you go. That's what you're gonna get.
Oh man, what a guy.
And you know, there wasn't a whole lot the judge could say about him. There was another time, same judge, okay, and Bone come into the court and he had his hat on, like hat like this here, you know, and so he's wearing his hat like this, and the judge looked at him and he said, $20. Bone said, what do you mean? He said, $20 for wearing that hat in court. He said, that disrespect to the court. Bone said, okay. He reached in his pocket and he pulled out 2 20s and he gave them to the judge. And the judge said, wait a minute, Bone, it was only $20. It's a fine. He said, look, Judge, I come in here with this hat on and I'm leaving with this hat on, so I might as well take the other $20 because I ain't taking it off.
Oh boy, what a character.
So that was another little story that I thought was funny, okay? If you recall, I told you that he couldn't read and write.
Right.
So him and his buddies were out and they were heading to Tampa, which is one of his favorite places to go. They had a lot of fun drinking there. Well, on the way up, old Bone's horse just about gave out. And he just totally just couldn't never make it to Tampa with the horse that he had. So he looks over in the field and he sees that farmer plowing the field, and he had a pretty good looking horse. So he says, I'm gonna go over there and trade horses with that guy. And the guy said, his buddy said, well, you ain't got no money. He said, well, I'll figure something out. So he goes over to the farmer and he's talking to him a little bit. Next thing you know, he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out a pencil, a piece of paper, and he scratches something on the paper and he gives that to the farmer. And next thing you know, they traded horses and he's riding back on the farmer's horse and he left his horse there. So he came back and he said, how'd you do that? He said, what do you mean? He said, well, you didn't have no money. And he said, well, I understand that. He said, but I gave him a promissory note. And the cowboy said, well, Bone, you know you can't read and write. And Bone said, I know that. He couldn't do it either. So that was one of the things that he pulled off. He had this buddy by the name of John Underhill. And they were good friends, and they herded cows all over Florida. They had what was called the 90-mile prairie. And they went all the way from up around Kissimmee, down along Kissimmee River and over the Caloosahatchee River, all the way over to Fort Myers. That whole area was where they worked. You know, they went out and herded cows. They went out in the fall and they went out in the spring. So him and John, they were good buddies, and they always went together. And when they went to the cow camp, they slept side by side, and they were good friends. Well, something happened to old John, and he got sick, and he died. Well, they were in the cow camp at the time, so it was just too far to take him back to Arcadia, so they decided to bury him right over there near the cow camp. And just about that time, there was a young fellow who came to Florida, and he was from New Orleans. And just a young fellow, but he was real sickly and skinny. And he took a real liking to Bone Mizell, and he thought he was somebody that he wanted to look up to. Well, him and Bone got along pretty good, and they got into a lot of conversation, and he said to Bone, you know, he said, I don't think I ever want to go back to New Orleans. He says, I've had enough of that. I love it here and I want to stay here. And he said, and I can tell you right now, I'm up to here on trains. I don't want to ride on a train ever again in my life. So Bone said, okay, I understand what you're saying. So it wasn't long after that, this young boy passed on too, you know. So Bone decided to write to folks and tell them that the boy passed on, see. So they sent money for a funeral. Well, when he got the money, instead of having the funeral and the burial, he went and got drunk. Well, it wasn't long after that, he decided that he had done the wrong thing and he wanted to make it up. So he went and got some friends of his and they dug a grave. Actually, they buried him right next to his buddy John Underhill because he thought that would be fitting, you know, put him near his friend. Well, it wasn't long after that he got another letter from the family in New Orleans. And they said to him, we're sending you money and we want you to dig up the remains of our son and ship his body on the train to New Orleans, and we're going to have a real fancy funeral for him, and we got him a nice monument, and we want to bury him here. So Bone was the only one pretty much that knew where the boy's body was. So he took the money and he got his friends and they went out there, and on the way out he started thinking about it, you know. So what happened was he had decided that since the boy never wanted to go back to New Orleans and he didn't want to be on a train ever again, he dug up his buddy John Underhill, and John Underhill had told Bone many, many times that he always wanted to take a nice train ride. So he shipped old John Underhill to New Orleans and let the boy stay over there in Florida, and he said, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's happy. He said John got his final train ride and the boy didn't have to go back to New Orleans. I know one time they told me that there was a fishing season, and the judge and the sheriff and the tax collector and everybody from the Arcadia courthouse, they all went out fishing. And they left a couple of marriage licenses there signed, so that if somebody wanted a marriage license when they were gone, they could get it.
I see.
So Bone goes into the courthouse and tells him he wants a marriage license. He's all drunk. And the gal says to him, okay. She says, what's your name? And he said, Bone Mizell. And he couldn't write, so he just made an X, you know. And he says, she says to him, well, I need to know the name of the gal that you're going to marry. And he looked at his buddy and he said, what was that gal's name again? and they couldn't remember the gal's name, so they never did give him a license, you know, but he didn't care, you know. Yeah. He just thought he wanted to get married, you know, but he never did. All right, listen, I got to run, so I'll catch you later. Okay?
Yeah, well, it's real nice talking to you.
All right, buddy.
Ziba King right here, a 50,000 cow rancher in Arcadia, Florida.
That's right.
Right from the horse's mouth.
For sure.
Okay. Come all you rounders, and I will tell about the Florida cowboy named Bone Mizell. He stood 6 feet 3 from his old hat to the ground, and he looked just like a scarecrow come riding into town. He could rope a cow and brand him before you said his name. Cattle driving, bullwhip cracking was his claim to fame. He was born in Central Florida about 1863. He rode off into the sunset and into history. Yeah, he was king of the old Cracker Cowboy, riding forever across the old scrub trails. Sing us a song and a story to tell about the legend of Bone Mizell. Some say he was born with a bullwhip in his hand, and his first words to his daddy were, "A cracker's what I am." At 6 he jumped in the water and he drove a herd of men King.